So trifling news came out in the last 24 hours since we got off the air. Yo.
Big time.
Yeah, the landmark decision Roe versus Wade is potentially going to be overturned. It could be one of the biggest social turning points in American history. I can't think of another social issue turning point. Black Lives Matter. This could be bigger.
Yeah.
It could be. It could literally, from a social standpoint, could be bigger. I'm not saying it's there. Everything is equally important, but in terms of the weight of social significance, this is as big as it gets.
Yeah.
Because the U.S. Supreme Court is poised to tell women in America they do not have a right to choose what happens to their body.
That's crazy to me.
The Supreme Court is now going to tell women that a majority of people in the state in which they live in will now have the right to tell you what to do with your body. There will be states that say women have a right to choose. And there will be other states where the majority of Americans will say women don't have a right to choose what happens with their body. And it all comes from a leaked opinion. It's the first time this has ever happened in Supreme Court history where in a future opinion that has not been published yet, that has not been made public yet, that is in draft form, has been leaked to the public. It is a repudiation, what has been leaked, of the 1973 decision which guaranteed constitutional protections in Roe versus Wade. It is being written, this leaked decision, which if it stands, and it's going to come out in another 8 weeks or so, if it stands as written or close to being written, it is going to say, according to the Supreme Court justice who wrote it, Samuel L. Alito, he was nominated by George W. Bush, the second Bush. He wrote Roe, which is the abortion law, which is the abortion Supreme Court decision, was egregiously wrong from the start. We hold that Roe must be overruled. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. It is exactly what is in the Constitution, where you have to protect the rights of, first of all, the Constitution is to protect the rights of minorities. It's as important so that the majority do not trample on minority rights. But what is odd here is that 70% of Americans are in favor of some form of abortion law that allows a woman to choose. So it's really it is the minority of people who are giving the majority and telling them what they can do with their bodies. The other two other interesting issues three other interesting issues about this is, number one, if you go back to if you think about how did this happen? This happened because Mitch McConnell, if you remember back in 2016, when President Obama wanted to nominate a Supreme Court justice in his last year, refused to allow a vote. President Obama's pick would have been a pro-choice judge. That would have made, ultimately, if you believe that Roberts, who we don't know how he's going to vote, but appears that he would vote not to overrule Roe versus Wade, would have kept a 5-4 majority in favor of Roe versus Wade again. But because Mitch McConnell never allowed Supreme Court justice to be voted on by the Senate. Remember, the Supreme Court had a 4-4.
Yeah. Okay,
and that 4-4 majority changed the trajectory of everything. That 4-4 majority kept DAPA, Deferred Action for Parent Arrivals, from becoming law. So it changed so much in American fabric. And then when Trump came in, he was able to vote 3 conservative justices onto the court. The one that Obama wasn't able to vote in, plus 2 additional ones.
Jeez.
And that gave a large conservative majority. Susan Collins, who is a Republican, who was one of the deciding votes on Brett Kavanaugh, who's one of the Trump judges. Brett Kavanaugh testified at the Senate. He said Roe versus Wade is settled law, and he does not intend to overrule it.
Yeah, okay.
It was a direct question by Susan Collins. She's now coming out and saying Brett Kavanaugh lied.
Ooh.
Because if he is now going to vote 2 years or 3 years later after his confirmation that Roe versus Wade is a wrong decision, then he lied at that Senate confirmation. Do you remember Brett Kavanaugh was the justice who was accused of raping a woman at a college frat or high school party? I don't remember if it was a high school party or a frat party. It was a college frat party. And the woman who came forward and was scared to come forward was ultimately ridiculed by the Republicans.
Jeez.
and made to be where she was the victim. She was victimized again, and eventually Brett Kavanaugh became a U.S. Supreme Court justice. If this passes, he lied under oath, and 3 years later, now saying Roe versus Wade is not settled law. What's also interesting is, from a legal standpoint, this is a huge slippery slope, meaning that if you don't have a right to decide on your own body, what other rights that affect your body now would be left to the majority of the people who live in your state? The right to contraception. Okay, if you believe in pro-life, you believe that their contraception, you shouldn't be able to take, or many people believe that you don't have a right to contraception. There could be laws that pass certain states that say you can't take a birth control pill.
What?
And you're going to say, well, this is my body. I can do whatever I want. Well, no, you don't have a right. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have a right to birth control pill. This is what the Supreme Court is saying.
Oh my gosh.
Tell me where it's written in 1776 or 1780, whatever, when they wrote the Constitution. Tell us where it's written you have a right to a birth control. Well, guess what? There was no birth control in 1780 something. Okay? But it's not written there. There's no amendment to the Constitution. You don't have a right to it. That's a decision for your representatives.
It just
So it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
There could be laws that pass. You don't have a right to have consensual premarital sex.
Oh, what?
There are countries out there where those laws exist.
Yes.
Okay, and people go to jail for that. And you're telling me that a very conservative state institution may not pass that law? And you would say, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. This is the United States of America. But if you don't have a right to choose your body, then you don't have a right to choose any of this, because there's no right in the Constitution to premarital sex. There's no right in the Constitution to same-sex marriage. There's no right that says that. So if you can go on and on and on about the rights that would be taken away, your rights to your own body, from this decision. And now it's being left up to your elected officials. This is tyranny by the majority. That's what it is. So if you say you have no rights to protection, it becomes tyranny of the majority. The majority in your particular state get to choose anything that happens to you. Tyranny by the majority of the minority. Jill's saying, you mean of the minority? I go, no, it's tyranny by the majority of the minority. Tyranny by the majority of the minority, yes. It's exactly what it is.
That's insane.
Yes. And what is also, as Nikisha Jacob said, this is some bullshit. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. It certainly
that's
is.
Exactly what it is.
It certainly is. And by the way, I read a statistic: 1 out of 4 women throughout their lifetime will either have an abortion or actually have a consultation about an abortion.
Wow.
That is affecting 25% of every woman, whether you're an American, a green card holder, an undocumented immigrant. It's affecting 25% 25% of, and God knows how many more,
Right.
you know, I mean, but that's the statistic. It affects every woman, affects every person. Because you can go on and on and on. What rights don't I have to my body anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it has not been published yet, but apparently it was leaked. And it was either leaked.
Who leaked it?
Well, you can look at two ways. Most of the sleuths on social media are saying it's somebody from Sandra Sotomayor's office. She's the most liberal of all of the Supreme Court justices. She was the one who took the staunchest stance in the oral argument. It could also be argued that it was somebody from a very conservative judge or one of the Republican judges who may have been wavering on his decision or her decision if it was a female judge. And they did this to leak it to make sure that judge didn't change his or her mind. So I mean, you could argue it's anybody. Now there's a lot of congressmen and there's a lot of senators, who, especially from the Republican side, who are saying whoever did this should go to jail. But I'm not aware of any law that says you can't leak a Supreme Court decision. It was just these were things that were never done before. But I'm not sure that there's a criminal statute that says you can't do this. So I don't know what crime the person committed. Perhaps if that person is a lawyer working as a clerk for a judge, may be subject to losing his or her law license. That could be a possibility. But in terms of committing a crime, there was no crime here. They just handed a decision that hasn't been final by a judge to somebody. And I'm not sure where that's in the criminal statute that says you can't do that. It just was never done. But I don't know where it says that you can do that. Now, one passage of Alito's draft opinion argues that social attitudes toward out-of-wedlock pregnancies have changed drastically since the 1970s, and that increased demand for adoption makes abortion less necessary. Now, I don't know where he got any of this information from. I don't know what country he lives in, but none of that is factually accurate.
Right.
None of it. And even if it is, quite frankly, Jonathan, why is he making those choices?
Right.
Again, why is he making those choices? So what happens when Roe versus Wade is overturned? Okay, each individual state is now going to decide whether or not you can get an abortion and under what circumstances. At the present time, there's about 25 states that most people feel are going to ban abortion either outright or ban it to such an extent that it'll be almost impossible to get an abortion.
Wow.
So in 25 of the 50 states, you're going to be out of luck.
That's a lot.
Okay, which means that as a pregnant woman, if you want to get an abortion, you would have to get on an airplane or drive in a car to a state that allows abortion. Now look at the red states. That red map. You're in the middle of that red map. That's a long drive.
Yeah.
That is a very long drive in the middle of that red map.
Yeah.
Pregnant to get an abortion.
Or the bottom of that red map.
Right.
The very
now,
bottom.
you can get on an airplane, but not everybody
Has airplane money.
Has airplane money, and then has to go stay in a hotel room.
Right.
And then has to go pay for an abortion. Okay, it's costly.
Yeah.
So this is going to affect minorities. This is going to affect poor people. And by the way, these are, forcing people to have a child that's not ready to emotionally give to a child, that's not ready to physically give to a child, that's not ready to perhaps bond with a child. Maybe this
Right.
person was raped
Yeah.
Do you know there's over 5,000 pregnancies a year from rape? How could you force somebody to have that child?
That would be...
Now, some women would still be able to get, there's an abortion pill. You would be able to go online if you have access to an internet and you are literate and know these things. And you could presumably buy an online abortion pill from a state that abortion is still legal and ship it across lines.
Doing something like that would scare me.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather like do it in a facility, you know, work with, you know, the actual doctor. So like the fact that a woman would have to go to that length, you know, to get an abortion, it's crazy.
Do you know what the first thing that popped into my mind is when I saw this? I said, what are we, a bunch of freaking animals here in the United States of America?
Yeah.
I said, since when are we animals that we don't get to decide what we want to do? And by the way, being pro-choice doesn't mean I'm pro-kill child.
Right.
It means this unborn child is in my body and I have a right to choose what happens to my body.
Yeah.
You don't have a right to force me to change my body, to have this unborn child grow in my body.
So now, like, even like, so what do where do we go when, you know, we're talking about health issues? Like, if you know that you can't you can't handle a child in your body, and you feel like, you know, some of us, sometimes you feel, you know what your body can handle, and you're like, I don't think my body will be able to handle this. I don't think I will live. So like, you have to still have it.
You still have, in certain states, Missouri, for example, depends on what the state law passes. Missouri, the state attorney for Missouri, they passed a no abortion law. Doesn't even matter if you were raped, if there's a health issue with a mother, you got to have that child.
How does that make sense?
You got to have that.
So you want a child to come into this world with no parent.
And the state attorney, what about how about bringing an unloved child into this world?
Yeah.
Okay, what about bringing a child who doesn't get any care into this world? Is that fair?
No.
To that child? By the way, the United States has joined only 3 countries in the world since the 1970s that has gone backwards with abortion. The entire trend around the world is to be pro-choice, except if you live in Poland, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. And by the way, we're talking about how it's going to affect, you know, poor and minorities. It's also going to affect refugees. It's going to affect immigrants. Okay? Abortion bans, they have far-reaching consequences. Within the first 30 days of the Texas abortion ban, last September, the state saw a 60% decline in abortions. Refugees, who are disproportionately represented in southern states along the U.S. border, are among the most endangered groups. Due to inherent instability, refugees are especially vulnerable to sex trafficking, and the 6-week mark under the Texas law, allowing a maximum buffer of 2 weeks from the time a pregnant woman misses her period, the first sign of pregnancy. In a third of rape-related pregnancy cases, victims do not discover they are pregnant until the second trimester, 13 weeks later. So in Texas, you would be out of luck. The whole thing. By the way, this turns the entire election this November upside down. Till this day, this election in November was a referendum on Biden handling the economy and Biden's handling of the southern border, because that's the culture war. Remember we talked about the culture wars? And we said immigration is now the center of the culture war? Well, step aside immigration. You're no longer the center of the culture war. The center of the culture war is now abortion. And where a majority of Americans perhaps were not happy with President Biden's handling of immigration on the southern border, think I saw a statistic that only 30% or 35% of Americans are happy with the way things are going on the southern border with immigration. As I said at the top of this show, 70% of Americans are pro-choice. And I would argue, Jonathan, that having your rights taken away to your body and the slippery slope that follows, perhaps no right to contraception, perhaps no right to same-sex marriage, perhaps no right to premarital sex, anything that has to do with your body, you don't have a right to anymore under the Constitution. Tyranny by the majority of the minority. I think that is a stronger reason for somebody to go to the polls and vote for a Democrat.
Yeah, for sure.
Than it is for somebody before this decision was leaked to go to the polls and vote for Republican because of what's going on in the southern border.
I agree.
So I say, move over immigration. The new culture war is abortion. Thanks for watching. For more Bradshaw Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.